Good morning. We had very briefly flashing by those antitrust rules, so do keep those in mind when we're doing our discussions. But yes, very much looking forward to sharing with you year 3 of the What is New research. So we went out and we asked some 1,900 consumers everything of what is new and innovative and technology in produce. Normally year 3 is a very big year because we're starting to be able to see trend lines, but in this particular case, 95% of the questions were brand new. So we don't have a ton of trending, but instead we're looking a little bit further down the horizon to see what might be interesting coming at us. At the same time, we also, of course, break out the results in addition to that national number, and we do that in 2 ways, most of all. First is the generations, of course, because as we know, the majority dollar right now is sitting in those Gen X and Boomer generations. But if we want to look at what is down the road, those Gen Z and Millennial opinions are very important. We also look at light, medium, and heavy buyers because the people that tend to eat fresh produce every single day or at least 6-7 days out of the week, they form a beautiful blueprint of where we want to take everybody else. So that is a really important data point as well. And then as Kristen mentioned, we look across every single department in the store to understand what are some of the bigger trends that are happening in the grocery department. We've done this across many different areas of the store, and as you can see, there's really 5 big areas where we're still seeing a lot happening in terms of innovation, in terms of how people are changing their dollars around, and those, of course, become opportunities for us to make sure that we are taking advantage of every single pocket of growth that is out there. So let's start with value. We all know it is a difficult marketplace out there, whether you oversee all of fresh or just produce. A lot of us are experiencing unit and volume pressure. But at the end of the day, we are not seeing consumers just constantly race down to the bottom, always buying what is on sale, always buying the cheapest item. A lot of times there is a decision process happening. Money well spent, money well saved. But yes, without a doubt, life is expensive. And when we ask consumers to take a look at, are you paying now more for groceries, for eating out, for produce, you just see that a huge number of people believe they are still paying more now than they did a couple months ago or even last year. What has really changed a lot is the perception in the marketplace relative to where is that cost increase coming from? And that is a dangerous one, I think, for the industry to keep in mind. Because if you think about that, 50% of people believe that there might be a little bit of cost increases, but more than anything, we are also lining our pockets a little bit more. That's a dangerous trend. And I think initially in the pandemic, we were really good about communicating why things got more expensive, why maybe we weren't as deep in our inventory, but continuing to talk about why these cost increases are happening so that all those articles about gouging in our industry start to get some counter arguments there. But without a doubt, life's pressures are just contributing to dollars being moved around, dollars moving around between retail and food service. But also, once people are buying in grocery stores, we're seeing those dollars moving around between different channels, between the different kinds of produce people are buying, and more than anything, to how much. Now, the big difference between the light and the heavy users is that those heavy users are not compromising how much they're buying. They are still dedicated to fresh produce, but they're changing around the channel in which they are buying. And that's why you're seeing some more pressure in the traditional supermarkets and clubs, supercenters, et cetera, benefiting a little bit more in the current environment. Therefore, I think lesson number one is let's point out that cost effectiveness of cooking. A really good example here by the Wegmans chain that always puts together several items that make a meal. And if you think about eating out, you know exactly how much you're spending because it's right there on the menu. Wegmans here too does the same thing. If you buy all these items, it's as low as $2.50 per person. What a great way to show that eating at home is indeed a lot cheaper. But also just really solving that dinner puzzle for people, putting the items together, what is for dinner, and making shopping super easy. As it relates to restaurant trips, what we're seeing is that, yes, the dollars in the food service channel are growing, but where the pressure continues to sit is the number of times that people eat out. And they really see that as a great way for them to save money as it relates to saving altogether on food and beverages. That is a little bit of an opportunity now for retail, because what we're seeing is if people choose to eat out a little bit less, a lot of them are looking to recreate those restaurant meals at home. Now, oftentimes when I talk to people, immediately they start thinking about the steakhouse, but realistically, there's a whole lot more trips sitting into fast food, into fast casuals, so think about how you would recreate those meals really from the pubby bar food to that steakhouse and where produce can fit in. But savings also play a role when people eat out. First of all, many of them are now choosing restaurants that automatically meet their budget. So already hedging the bets that when I order the items, I will be able to spend the money that I look to be spending. But when they're eating out and they're looking to order, what is happening is a lot of that meal is contracting into that main dish. It's good and bad for produce, because oftentimes, of course, in the main entree, that's where produce shines as well. But keep in mind, how do we keep people involved with those appetizers and those sides as well, where they're potentially looking to save? But another opportunity for retail rolls out of that, and that is the fact that when people do a lot of takeout and delivery, and that is still growing and still up so tremendously much from what we saw pre-pandemic. I was looking through McDonald's food service report that they put out, the financial performance reports, and they were saying that only 10% of all the orders that take place in McDonald's are eaten on premise. That means 90% are not. Now, some of them might be in the car, some of them might be at work, but a lot of times the food is delivered or picked up and consumed at home. And as you can see, there's more than 50% of people that say, when I order restaurant food for delivery or takeout, I add store-bought produce to those items. So that is another big opportunity. But all in all, the reality is that, yes, we are looking at a home-centric meal landscape, and we have been. Typically about 54%-ish of dollars sit in retail. Right now, we're still sitting around 60% of total dollars that come from food and beverage into the retail channel. And so what we're seeing is much like the food service channel, the dollars are up because of inflation, but many, many commodities and many produce departments altogether are not able to continue to drive those units and the pounds. And that has been going on now for the second year in a row. So we're lapping the volume declines, and that, of course, is never a great thing. So when we look at the levers of growth that sit behind that performance, there's always the 3 ones, right? We can get more people to buy, we can get them to buy more often, and we get them to pay a little bit more per trip. Well, the household penetration for fresh produce altogether continue to be tremendously high, 99%. We don't have to worry too much about that. We actually are seeing an increase in trips, and I think that has everything to do with those people figuring out where those promotions are happening and doing more trips to capitalize on the promotions. But where we're really getting hurt is those units per trip. And that, of course, relates directly back to the consumer ultimately only having one way to save, and that's buying a little bit less. And that is really something where the ultimate focus for all of us will have to become, how do we get that one more unit in the basket through cross-merchandising or through just creative promotions, really introducing people to something new as well. Because the eye is on promotions, and people believe that promotions have tremendous power to purchase something different, to purchase something that you had not planned. We know that especially in produce, the eyes decide, but a hot promotion can certainly move an item into a basket as well. So what Circana is finding is that we are seeing the level of promotions back to what it was in 2019, the number of promotions, but we're still not seeing the depth of the discounts. It's not just in produce, it's really everywhere. And as a result, we're not seeing people reacting to promotions the way they used to. So that is a big one to keep in mind. Personalized sales promotions are very, very interesting to folks. If you think about it, a major value is also relevance. Make my life a little easier. Give me the discounts of items that I already shop for or you think that I would be interested in. So more even than last year, 62% are interested in those personalized promotions. And of course, we're all continuing to push that digital piece as the paper circular continues to become less of a resource for promotions. Growing creativity, that's a beautiful thing that we're seeing out in the marketplace. You know, if we're not able to lap last year's numbers, then maybe we can get creative with time things where we just have a one-day promotion, maybe even a happy hour promotion. We're seeing produce being the budget hero to say we can do 5 items for 25 bucks. And therefore, we can mix and match meat, sides, produce, et cetera, all together. So keep that creativity in mind as a way where produce is able to help out some of those more expensive items on the plate as well. And this slide here is the last one for the first section, but I think it is one of the most important slides of the entire deck. I'd say print this sucker out, put them on your nightstand, because this is really the way in which consumers are saying, yes, there is tremendous pressure on income, but there are still ways in which I'm willing to splurge a little bit more. And that is really a big roadmap for us to realize how can we make sure that when people are in the store, they might put that one extra item in there. So only 14% said, sorry guys, no matter what you do, I am buying what I'm buying. There's nothing you can do to get me to buy that extra item. But as you can see, the list on the other side is quite interesting. There's a couple of items that have everything to do with health and well-being, one of our next topics. You see items in there if it's grown most sustainably or ethically. Items that when I need time or when I need more convenience. So as you can see, a lot of the trends we'll be talking about. All right, here we go. So our next topic is health and well-being. As we saw, the most important reasons why people are willing to splurge a little bit more is if they can feel good about it. Not just physically, though, emotionally as well. In fact, that was actually the number one. So this whole idea of health and well-being has really evolved into nutrition, hardcore health, to physical health and happiness, emotional well-being, whatever label you want to slap on it. Because that's what we're seeing is in all the different categories I do research in, whether that is candy or snacks or frozen or meat or produce, we're seeing a little bit less focus on those very restrictive diets in which people will eat no carbs or high protein and just make life very difficult. There's way more of that old-fashioned everything in moderation and it's okay. So the nutritional focus is a little bit less, but as it relates to produce, that's the number one way that people always associate healthy eating. In fact, if you go to Google and you type in healthy eating and you click on images, every single image that pops up is always fruit and vegetables. You also see that that blueprint we've been talking about, those heavy buyers, the heavy users of fresh produce, they are much more focused on healthful eating. So there is a big important connection. But at the same time, over the last couple of years, we've really seen the definition of health and well-being evolve. And more than anything, it is not always about restricting. It's not always about that nutrition and the hardcore health. It is also about happiness. And that's really something that became big during the pandemic as we were all stuck in their houses. So 77% of people agree that physical health and happiness are equally important. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Because as we saw, it was the number one reason to splurge a little bit more. And yet I would argue, how many of you have a signage in the department or have text on your label that talks about togetherness? Can you use a fudge break? It's always time for a treat. The very best treats, the flavor of togetherness. Bakery is really the department that heavily leans into that emotional well-being. And I think we can take a page from the bakery book and start to leverage that a little bit as well. Really go into the storytelling, really talking about, hey, if you're in the mood for a little sweet treat, why couldn't that be berries? Why couldn't that be a kiwi? Why couldn't that be the fruit that you love so much? Why does it have to be the donut, the cupcake, or the cookie? So there's, I think, a big opportunity for us to really lean in a little bit more on that emotional well-being, on the happiness, and really have some fun in the department as well. Here are some examples of both. You see Rouse's really pull out the healthy items on the salad bar, led by all the different produce items. You see a lot of different nutritional programs. You see high foodie really relating to that emotional side of people who love to cook and discover new items. But at the same time, there's some opportunity to have fun, whether that's in the department or on the label, like you see here on the tomato label, talking a little bit about this could potentially be the most delicious tomatoes you've ever had in the universe, and you were lucky enough to find them, so yay for you. Witty is a thing right now, of course, made very big by TikTok and everything else, so have some fun out there and relate to storytelling and humor as well. But yes, as it relates to produce, it is that #1 health connotation, and that's a good thing. You know, imagine being meat, where you're constantly having to prove yourself that yes, it is important to have meat, and it is healthy, and don't worry about it. People really associate health with produce, but at the same time, the big barrier for us is that it's not always that easy to get to our 5 a day or whatever goal you have as it relates to eating fresh produce. In fact, there is a good chunk of people who will say it is somewhat or very hard to get to there, realistically speaking. At the same time, people don't always know where the bar is. If I get a sandwich from Subway and I sprinkle some lettuce on there, does that count as a portion, or is that just a sprinkle of lettuce? So having, first of all, a bar and knowing where that bar is, in other words, have the portion size right on the package, 86% of consumers are interested in that. So that is a big takeaway, and you see that being even higher among some of those heavy buyers. We also see that people very specifically go after items because of a known health benefit. But what we're seeing is that older generations are much more familiar with those health benefits, and especially our heavy blueprint buyers are much more known to all those different benefits. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the spinach and iron and an orange and citrus. People always come up with those kinds of things. So 2 big lessons here. How do we get those old wisdoms, we'll call them, back into those younger generations? And #2, the more people know, the more we can really play to our strong suit of health and well-being. Well, the question is, what do people know? Well, people know vitamin C. That's pretty much the answer. Because when we said, what is the #1 thing that you think about in the produce department? The answer is vitamin C. So this word cloud is reflecting the number of times that people said something. The larger the font, the more often it was mentioned. Normally I have to say squeeze your eyes a little bit and the big ones pop out. We don't have to do that because it's all about vitamin C, but come on, we're about more than that. And it was very interesting to see that the heavy buyers were indeed about more than that. They rattled off a whole bunch of different things that they thought about in the produce department. They also connected features and benefits, so in other words, vitamin D for energy or vitamin C for immunity, etc. So again, this is a big finding. But a big lesson for us is that we're being outmarketed by center store. Because if you think about all those veggie pastas, veggie chips, plant-based meat alternatives, all of that has fruit and veggies. You can see some of them here up on the screen very prominently on the package. Additionally, they very prominently talk about, oh, this is an immunity beverage or a protein thing or digestion and wellness, you name it. And an astounding, scary, you chose the word, 83% of people believe that these kinds of items can indeed get you to your 5 a day in terms of fresh produce or fruit and vegetables. Who are we to say that that's right or wrong? But we have to keep in mind that our competition is a little bit wider. Now, a lot of these supplements are not bound by the same rules that we are relative to the FDA. Here's a very interesting example relative to mushrooms. You go into the supplement aisle and there's endless mushroom powders, pills, supplements, you name it. They say we got 10 mushrooms in there, and as you can see, every single mushroom is listed. It's listed with the benefit. We are not often allowed to do that on our package, and yet I would argue fresh is best. In our room it is, but in the mind of the consumer, if 83% say we can get to our 5 a day by eating this kind of supplement, some of our dollars are definitely leaking there. So taking that plant-based dialogue back and really teaching people about the features and the benefit is a big opportunity in health and well-being. Where do we need to do that? Well, of course, consumers always point to the package label. Limited real estate, we know that. Fortunately, they're also looking at apps and websites, etc. But when we look around the world, you see some really interesting best-in-class examples. For instance, here you see Woolworths in Australia that right on the package explains what creates a serving of tomatoes, but also talks a little bit about what kind of immunities or what kind of nutrients are in there and what they do for you in terms of the feature and the benefits. So take a look, but yes, a lot of focus there on the label of the package. Now, how should we communicate? I was on Nextdoor, a little app, the other day, and I saw this post. I don't know if it's easy to read in the back of the room, but it basically is a person in my neighborhood looking for organic, non-GMO foods, especially vegetarian and vegan fruit and vegetables. So it's that, you know, you can't underestimate the, we'll call it lack of knowledge, to be nice, of the consumer. And so we asked, okay, how should we communicate? Should we say this has this many milligrams or whatever you want to use of vitamin C? Should we say oranges are rich in? Or should we say oranges support your immune system? And as you can see, people do want really that feature and the benefit. So I know FDA is not always easy in terms of what we're allowed to put on there, but just something to keep in mind. Planet and people. That, of course, is kind of a natural extension of health, because oftentimes when people talk about sustainability now, it is no longer just about the planet. It's really about doing better for them, doing better for the planet, doing better for the community, even doing better for the animals. So this whole idea of people and planet is closely related to health. And what is interesting there is a lot of people always say, well, how is it that there's all this economic pressure and we see people buy ultra value items, but at the same time, they continue to buy organic and they continue to believe in sustainability and actually pay the price for sustainability? Well, the thing is, yes, life is full of competing choices, and it seems like life has become increasingly about and instead of or, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. It's not always about and, because at the end of the day, you got to make the end of the month with the money that you have. But a lot of times, people do continue to weigh these things into their purchases. Because at the end of the day, there is a big belief, especially among young consumers, that this whole idea of single-use plastic is a big issue. 83% believe that we should be addressing that as an industry. 69% are concerned about water, which has taken a lot of headlines over the last couple of years. 90% believe that we should help underserved communities with access to fresh fruit and vegetables. There's many more statistics in the longer deck, and also make sure that you come to those education sessions. There is the schedules on your table, but let's have a listen to how all these things are connected in the mind of the consumer.
I try and look out for the organic foods just solely for that purpose.
You know, you're shipping stuff from God knows how many miles away in diesel trucks, and you know, the impact that just bad farming practices have in general on the environment. I'm really not happy with most of that.
Honestly, no.
Yeah, I think about living in Colorado, I think about water.
The alternatives that we've been given aren't totally viable, right? Aren't as reliable, oftentimes have their own dramatic environmental consequences that we, that aren't obvious.
It is crazy just how much, farming and just the food industry does impact, just overall the environment.
You see the change, the radical changes to the environment, kind of want to do something about it. Of course, avoiding using, recycle more, avoid using plastic, and
contribute something. I wouldn't say no, but I think it's infinitesimally small compared to what the Earth's been going through for millions of years.
The more knowledge we have and the more informed decisions we can make based on the history of the food is becoming a bigger factor every day.
It would be lovely to have more transparency.
And I'm aware of all that. So environmentally and ecologically and humanitarian wise, All of that's important.
More than the dollar, it's about the impact that you're having on society. If you actually want people to buy your products and help society, you need to help them at every step of your process.
Big, oh, here we go. If you notice the age of the people in these videos, you've noticed that some of the more older people didn't really feel like agriculture has all that much impact on the environment. I believe the word was infinitesimally small, which I had never heard of, but fancy way of saying it. But some of the younger people, right, the 19-year-old college student, oh, it's just crazy how much impact agriculture has on the planet. So yes, these issues are going to be more important as that dollar is starting to shift from the older to the younger generations. Oops, can you take me one back? There we go. What we're seeing in retail and a lot of brands as well is that retailers are starting to tie all these things together as well. So the planet, the community, taking care of people, really showing that I'm not only donating food to the food bank, but which food bank in which store to really bring it back to that community. Have hours for people who are sensitive to a lot of noise and other traffic, really highlighting people, talking about what benefits you bring into people. Now, a lot of times you guys tell me, you know, we do all that, but it doesn't feel right to be bragging about that. But I would argue that if you look at the statistics and how important a lot of these things are, especially to younger consumers, I would argue it isn't bragging. It is just giving your consumers one more reason to love you and one more reason to feel good about the purchase that they are making. We also asked about upcycling and preventing waste ideas, and a lot of consumers believe that absolutely we should be using fruit and veg that can no longer be sold in the produce department and other departments. We gave the example of blueberries into the bakery, blueberry muffins, or using peaches that were of different sizes or maybe had some blemishes into salsa. And you see, again, center store brands go after that very hard. Which is it? It is Campbell's, I think, that has the peach salsa that they give directly to food banks, etc. And a lot of people believe that that is a great thing to do. You might already doing it. Are you taking credit for it? That is the big question. Loosening specs. Now, I'll be the first to admit that it's hard to ask this in a survey, but we did anyway because we were curious what people would say. And we said, you know, typically when you walk in the produce department, all the apples, the onions, etc., will all be of a certain size. What do you think if they just were all the sizes and it didn't really matter? According to consumers in the survey, again, we have to test this in store, it might be a great way to prevent food waste. But I think it comes down to how do we communicate? How do we talk about why there are different sizes instead of every apple looking like a twin to the one next to them? We also see that playing out in some of the retailers across the world. We see a lot of focus on that reducing waste, and it's often tied back to a cost reduction for the consumer. So really giving them a lot of different opportunities to help the environment and help their own pocket a little bit as well. You see a lot of focus on portion sizes where you have cauliflowers that are the size of my palm, or just items that are cut like cabbage where you can just literally buy a quarter cabbage. So keep that in mind as well as a great way to help prevent food waste, but talk about why you're doing that. Consumers are very, very interested in learning about that. 81% are saying, I would love to know about who, what, where and when relative to where the items that I buy in restaurants or in food service are coming from. And again, of course, they're looking to that package label, which is now getting awfully busy, but hopefully we can still figure out a way to use those QR codes, to link to the websites, have those fold-out labels, etc. Because at the end of the day, that extra story might be that extra item in the basket that we've been looking for. What we're seeing internationally is that whether we like it or not, as retailers, you are that line of first defense, if you will. A lot of consumers say, well, yes, ultimately, I know the person who raises the meat, grows the produce, etc., is responsible for taking care of the communities, but I buy from a retailer, so I need you to be that first line of defense. And internationally, you see a lot of this signage that talks about we do business with farms we trust. You see that in big signs in the produce department, you see it directly on the packages, and you see just whole stories about how together, grower, retailer, and consumer, we can work on that food waste piece. There's many other things that we tested. Here's a couple more. We're going to have sessions on that in the afternoon on the show floor. And we asked about, well, instead of those little stickers, how about we use lasers or take the pigment out to have that QR code on there? That's where we see the first time where that technology paradox, I calls it, jumps in. Sometimes people are a little weary having technology touch their food, so that's something to keep in mind, though a good 50% believes that that is a great way to take yet a little bit extra out of the environment. How about interest in carbon footprint? Well, a little bit soft, I would say. Now, having done a lot of these consumer videos, I had one lady say carbon footprint. I thought it was carb. So again, sometimes we talk about these things in our industry, and it makes all the sense in the world for us, but really communicating in a way that makes sense to the consumer, that is the most important part. And that was really the reason why we ran this question. We've all been buzzing around regenerative agriculture, and I think everybody in this room probably agrees that regenerative agriculture is a beautiful thing. We asked consumers, what is regenerative agriculture? And as you can see, a good 38% have no idea. They think it's either growing non-GMO crops or it's growing the same thing again and again. Not what we intend when we put regenerative agriculture on our package. Here's some more videos as well.
Generates in the word, so.
You grow it and you grow it again and you grow it again after that.
We can grow meat without it being from a animal, or I mean, it originally kind of started as an animal, but now we're growing it in a petri dish kind of thing.
Regenerating something, but I can't even, I hate to even imagine what they would be regenerating.
Oh, here we go. Pretty clear that at the end of the day, keep in mind that when we talk to consumers, we need to talk into that consumer voice. Another thing we tested in order to prevent waste or maybe take a lot of the cardboard boxes out of the system was, what do people think about using those RPCs? Again, something we'd have to test in the store, absolutely, but as you can see, a lot, almost 60% believe that it is a great idea to use those reusable bins and reduce the cost, minimize handling, and take a lot of the package waste out of the system. And there are some beautiful pictures here of what that can look like as well. Keep in mind, again, Center Store is out marketing us in this regard, where a lot of their cardboard boxes is starting to have messages like this: I'll be back, not my first job. So if you go this route, make sure that you take, again, advantage or take credit for the kinds of things that you're implementing and talk about the amount of waste you're taking out of the system. Fresh produce waste at home, big thing as well. 1 in 5 say that they're constantly throwing away fruit and veg. In part, that might be because they have to buy it in quantities that are a little bit too big for their families. In part, that is because they're not able to ripen the items correctly at home. And in part, that is because they simply didn't get around to eating them because life got in the way. But giving people tips and hints as to how they might ripen items at home, how they can keep things fresh, as we saw earlier, or really giving just general tips about freshness and talking about the speed of the supply chain, how we are sourced from farms that are maybe nearby, or how fast an item has gotten from the field or the greenhouse to the store, etc. And again, take the credit where credit is due. If you look at the European retailers, what we're seeing is they're doing all the same things that you are. They're just a little bit more bold about taking the credit for it. Here is Albert Heijn in my native Netherlands, where you're seeing they changed something about the strawberries and they're using AI to see exactly how ripe a strawberry is. And as a result, they're able to save 70,000 kilos of strawberries through that program. So very specifically educating consumers why they're doing it and what the feedback is. All right, the next section, we talked about money well spent, money well saved. Well, the same goes for time. Sometimes you want to save time, sometimes you're enjoying that 10-hour-long brisket. So time well spent, time well saved, very much like it. What we're seeing year after year, and this is something we have been tracking, is that by far, not everybody in the population is eating fresh produce every single day. In fact, not even 60% of people are eating fresh produce every day. We're not even talking about getting to your 5 a day, just simply eating fresh produce. What stands in the way? Number one and number two are time and money. That's always where the connotation that people have that fresh produce is more expensive hurts us. And then, of course, as we all know, life just tends to get in the way sometimes. So our answer to that has always been value added, and if you look across the store, certainly we've expanded that assortment again and again, and there are some beautiful solutions there. And as you can see, there is high interest among everybody in the population, especially the younger generations, to have those time-saving solutions, to have to do a little bit less, mix and match items with maybe meat that you cook from scratch or other items that you make from scratch. But at the same time, when we do compare these numbers to having asked that question a year and 2 years ago, we are seeing that that interest is down just a little bit. But I would point out that the demographic differences between Gen Z, the little z, and boomers look at how much more focused that younger generation is on those to-go solutions, on those easy, maybe snack, maybe a quick lunch, maybe a quick breakfast solution. So there is still a very bright future in that for sure. We also talked about purchasing decisions, and we said, you know, there's 4 things that really impact how you purchase fresh produce, and you had to say which one is the one most important one. What you're seeing in the current environment is that price, of the money aspect of it is, of course, becoming a big deal. But at the same time, as we know, we've always been known for health and nutrition, so that one is very high. And then when it all boils down to what was the number reason why people want to spend a little bit more, it was if they love it, if it makes them happy. So taste and mood is continuing to be very important. Produce is bought with the eyes, right? What we're in the mood for. So that means at the end of the day, something's got to give. And in that current environment, convenience is that something's got to give. Not all the time. But when we look at the Circana numbers, we are seeing a little bit of pressure on that value-added produce purchase. From a dollar perspective, we are chugging right along, and then of course has everything to do with that inflationary push. But from a pound perspective, as you can see, we were doing the nice step ladder thing, but then it started to come down a little bit, and we have fallen back to levels from a few years ago. Both fruit and veg, as you can see in red, has that pound pressure, and that is that consumer sometimes making room in their budget for that convenience-focused items, and other times deciding to do the work themselves and forego the value-added solution. So what can we do about that? Well, 82% do believe that they can be prompted to purchase more value-added product. Number one way to do so would be better prices. Number two way, if it were to last longer. What we're seeing in survey across survey is that reducing waste at home is a big way in which people are looking to save. So in other words, that whole sustainability aspect is no longer just for the doing good and we shouldn't be wasting food, but there is a growing number of people in the United States who are simply saying, I cannot afford to waste food. So the freshness is another reason why not everybody is buying as much value added as they did before, really placing a lot of emphasis on the when as it relates to value added. But there's still a lot of pocket of growth, and I also think that continuum of choice can be a big winner. Here you see a pineapple display where you both have the value added pineapple as well as that whole pineapple, so people can decide what they're in the market for that day. We see a lot of focus too on value added in the deli prepared area, and it is growing big there. So I would argue that some of the dollars that used to sit in the produce department have now moved over to the deli department. While we all like to protect our own turf, I think that is a good thing because that's really where people are looking for their meal solutions. So definitely have a big presence of produce in that area. But I also very clearly see in our survey that convenience is a big driver of money for us, but it can also cost us. Our fresh consumers are not just fresh produce consumers. They buy frozen, they buy canned, they buy supplements, they buy energy shots, they buy smoothies, squeeze pouches, you name it. And again, look at the difference between Gen Z, our younger generation, and boomers, one of the older generations in the marketplace. Look at especially the beverages, the squeeze pouches, and the fruit and veggie shots, and how much more those young consumers are consuming their produce nutrients through these time-saving, convenience-focused solutions. Is that ridiculous? Maybe. Is it the way they are acting? Absolutely. So this will be something that's very hard to fight, but we have to understand why is that, and do they believe that when you buy one of these on-the-go squeeze pouches, which by the way, call themselves fruit on the go, is that impacting our dollars? Yes, it absolutely is. 54% said sometimes I take these solutions instead of eating fresh fruit and veg, and 14% say I typically do. And if you look along those younger generations, that is much more prevalent. So keep in mind that our competition is so much more wide than frozen and canned alone. But convenience continues to be important, and we're definitely seeing that come out in some of those newer cooking appliances as well. Which cooking appliances did you use more for produce than you did a few years ago? That beloved air fryer that is the topic of every party discussion pops to the top, but you also see grilling. And I just love it when I walk around the produce department where the retailers are educating people that the grill is for produce as much as it is for meat. If you look at Wegmans, they had a whole brochure on veggie grilling. Here you see a great example by Albertsons with a lot of stickers in the produce department reminding people that these items are really good on the grill. And then you see some movement still in Instant Pot and sous vide as well. The bottom line there is, again, other departments in the store are investing in these new ways of cooking, and if we don't innovate or have our tips relate to those different cooking methods, somebody else will. Here you see some great examples out of the frozen food aisle. That very big, the biggest word on the package is air fryer or steamables, etc. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a different way in which you package or go to market, but at the very least, if you're in the business of doing recipes or giving tips, keep those new ways of cooking in mind. Technology is, of course, one that really cuts across all other four areas that we talked about, because that technology and an innovation piece is sometimes what enables health and wellness or convenience, etc. But we had some very interesting technology-focused questions as well that we wanted to show to you. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we're dealing with a little bit of a technology paradox, where people rather lose their credit card than their phones. And we're connected to the internet 2.5, 3 hours a day outside of work. But at the same time, sometimes when technology touches our food, people become a little bit more hesitant. So let's look at some of that. Well, first of all, let's talk about technology and innovation in terms of new items. Even though we're seeing people pull back into familiar because that is a way to make sure that you don't have buyer's remorse and wasted your dollars, we do see that 82% of consumers like the idea of some new flavors, new varieties in the fruit and veg department. If you think about Center Store, they put billions of dollars in innovation, so this is an interesting area for us to really highlight. I will tell you, the picture I took right there was at Publix. I walked in, they had these things called cherries and plums. My child calls them chums. I thought they were $2.99. I figured, oh, I love both. I'm gonna buy these. Then of course it was $2.99 a pound and I end up spending $9. An hour later, hubby comes home. He goes, oh, I bought these things. I figured you'd wanted to try them. They were only $2.99. I'm like, a pound, I've done that. So $18 later, they were delicious. But as you can see, 83% of our heavy buyers believe that they would buy more with innovation. So calling out new, bringing seasonal items, limited time offers, the way restaurants do things is a really great way to capture people's interest. Now, we went a step further and we said, you know what, you see all these pastas with proteins. We saw a picture earlier of ketchup with added protein. Do you want produce that maybe has extra vitamin C or onions that you don't tear up, or maybe berries that can stay good a whole week? That's where that technology paradox comes in. And some people go, oh, no, that's too sci-fi for me. Whereas especially the younger generations are like, ooh, yeah, that sounds great. Because again, they were looking for that shortcut in the form of supplements, of shots, of beverages. So this can be something interesting. Now, where do people get their information? A lot of technology involved in that as well. Though I will say, in the current environment, and this goes back to not wanting to waste dollars or waste food, routine is creeping back up compared to the levels that they were sitting at last year. But if you add up all the digital resources, you see that digital is quite important. Now, the reason why they are not in the top 3, top 2, is because there's such massive generational differences as it relates to the different social media platforms. TikTok is the #1 among Gen Z. Instagram is the #1 among millennials. You see Facebook be really big to boomers. So all of it washes out across the population. But when you add them all up, digital is very big. Now, a year ago, none of us had heard of the word ChatGPT, and it seems like every article you read these days is about ChatGPT. What is it? It is artificial intelligence in which you can ask certain things. So just to show you guys, and the text might be a little bit small, so I'll go over it. I said, meal plan me for a week for a family of 4, and just to make it a little bit more difficult, I said it needs to be cheap, nutritious, and I need to be able to get these meals done in 20 minutes. I click go, and boom, it pops up. And I said, oh, this is kind of nice, but I don't like Tuesday and Thursday, switch it out, and by the way, make me a grocery list. So when it makes the grocery list, as you can see, it actually, I'm a slow typer, apparently I talk faster than I type, but here it is. It actually makes my grocery list for my weekly meal plan, and boom, I have my grocery list by meat and poultry, by vegetables, by grains, etc. What a beautiful thing. If you think about the fact that none of us talked about this even a year ago, and 5% are using artificial intelligence to meal plan, this might be something that is quite big. So we did ask people about that in your imagination. First of all, you're using it, and as you can see, the headlines are a little bit bigger than the actual usage. But at the same time, when we ask people, what can you envision AI doing for you? They are pretty much envisioning AI to play a role in all sorts of things, from meal planning to recipes to how do I make this in my air fryer to all these different things. So start thinking about that as well. The thing about AI is it is not in our kitchens. It is not seeing what people are doing and how they're making it. It learns from the body of evidence that is online. So your commodity, your brand, your recipes, it has to find those online in order to be able to include them into the meal plan that I told it to make. How about the QR codes? Are they truly back? Well, they certainly came back with a vengeance during the pandemic, but we're not quite seeing that enormous push. We're seeing only 11% saying they frequently use them. I often get phone calls of people who say, hey, is it normal that I put a QR code on my package and I get just a handful of scans? Yeah, that's pretty normal, but I still believe it is a great way to provide information, as we saw throughout, about the who, what, where, and when, about recipes, about all these different things, because ultimately our package real estate is only so big. And people do recognize that there's a lot of different great ways in which QR codes can be used, so I do believe that they'll be around for a little while longer. In terms of online shopping, that of course took a leap of 5 years forward during the pandemic, and we continue to sit about right there. We don't have a whole lot of extra households buying online, but at the same time, we do continue to see fairly strong number of trips, and in terms of produce, we continue to see a couple more items ending up in that basket. So for produce, it continues to be an area of focus and an area of growth, and where there is a big opportunity is in shoppable recipes. So here is one where I'm just scrolling on Pinterest, and then all of a sudden you see one of these recipes, you can click on it, And with one click of the button, you can add all the items that are in that recipe into your cart. And then, of course, with all the 1 hour delivery, you can literally go from inspiration to having these items in your kitchen to prepare them all within 1 hour. So this is something that consumers are highly excited about, because haven't we all been there where you sit and add endless things to your Instagram or your TikTok feed, and realistically, how often do you go back to them? So this is really a way to close that gap between inspiration and purchase. We went a step further and we figured, you know what, people might not be buying as much groceries online as they were, but those virtual worlds, your Minecraft, your Roblox, all these different things, they are a giant virtual economy. 4 billion virtual transactions, meaning money changed hands, is what they're expecting for this year, up from 3.2 billion last year. 200 million active users in Roblox alone. What does that have to do with us? Well, apparently, we can get people to work in our stores, but as you see here, people sit and build a virtual supermarket and spend hours and hours a day operating their virtual supermarkets. They also feel the need to buy a virtual carrot for their virtual character in a virtual farmer's market instead of getting out of their house and going to your store. So the question is, do we have an opportunity there to really inspire those younger people to engage with fresh produce? Here's the video on the guy that is being a supermarket, realizing how difficult it is.
Second, I don't think I'm doing this right. I couldn't find everything I wanted. I know, guys, I know my options are much more limited than the Cappy Express company, but you know, we're doing the best we can here.
Yeah, I've got fruits, vegetables, beans, and video games.
Beans and video games, come on down.
So there you have it. You're doing it all wrong. Beans and video games. And apparently that will get you all the business to get that unit into the basket. But anyways, think about that. Think about where do we need to be to meet the consumer of tomorrow, or really even the consumer of today. We have 2 seconds when people grab something in your produce department. We have mere minutes that they shop your produce department, but they spend 2.5 hours playing supermarkets themselves. So just something to keep in mind. Access is really one of the big keys, I think, altogether. Needless to say, none of you guys are going to put vending machines everywhere or having these little trucks at truck rallies with produce, but the interest among generations, especially the younger generations, really points to the fact that having access to fresh produce in convenient locations is another piece of the puzzle. And I think that goes back to that interest that we're seeing in smoothies and shots, etc., because you can have them in your bag, you can consume them wherever you want. The vending machine, we said, well, what if there were one in the bottom of your apartment building or at your gym or at your work? And look at the interest in that. Or when you're at one of those food truck rallies, how about one that has fruit and veg, or maybe as you go into work? So keep in mind, access is a big thing, and that is a big clue to secondary locations and cross-merchandising as well. A lot of retailers around the world are doing some very innovative things in technology. Here's Carrefour in France, who decided to have their own rave party in one of their stores, where they just one evening changed their entire store into a big rave party, and they served nothing but their private label food, and they had thousands of people come and party. You see Kaufland in Germany sponsoring big concerts. You see people have pop-up restaurants in parks serving food for whoever wants to sit down. So be creative, I suppose, as it comes to technology and how you interact with people. But we also see that technology paradox, and here are some of the numbers. We asked consumers, what do you think about chefs preparing some or all of your food? What do you think about robots delivering the food to your table? And as you can see, there's quite a few people who said, yeah, I don't like this. Or, I could like it, but it better not cost somebody their jobs. And that's what we hear a lot when we talk to consumers. You know what, if my produce guy or my deli guy, their lives is better because of some sort of automation, then great. But don't replace my person. So as it relates to technology, I think we've made amazing inroads on the back of the house, amazing inventory improvements, etc. But as it relates to consumers, there is a little bit of a risk, and we need to make sure that we have that right mix of technology and service, because after all, we continue to be a people business. So my daughter came home over the summer and said, Mom, The bowling alley has a delivery robot, and I was just working on this survey, and I said, oh, that's wonderful, take me a video, you can bring my old phone. She goes, okay, I'll do it for $2. All right. Oh, and by the way, I need 20 because I need to order food so that it can bring me my food. All right, $22 in, all right. The first time, she forgot to take the video because that was my fault because I don't let her have a phone. The second time, she forgot because the food got there so quickly she wasn't ready. So $62 in, here is a video of your food robot in the bowling alley.
Hello, your food is here. Here. Thank you. Yes, we did it.